The Alldus podcast is brought to you by Alldus International, supplying your expert AI and digital transformation staffing needs across the US and Europe. Today, you are listening to our AI in Action series, where leading minds in AI from across the world share their story, success, and advice. AI in Action cuts through the hype and explores the true impact of artificial intelligence in our world today.
You're listening to AI in Action. I'm your host, JP Valentine. Our guest today is Ben Williams. Ben is the Chief Operating Officer at Exyn Technologies. Ben, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's our pleasure. So Ben, let's start with a bit of background of yourself, please. Can you give us a bit of an overview of your own background, particularly where you got involved in technology and what's led you to your current role as the COO at Exyn?
So it's been a very interesting and circuitous road for me getting to where I am now. Although I've been in the technology space broadly for over 20 years, I started my first two companies when I was in undergrad, and I ran out of tuition money, needed to find a way to pay my way through the rest of those years. And that was sort of a trial by fire introduction to the startup technology space in general. So I was able to use those two small business basically that paid my way through the rest of undergrad. Following that, I went into the Navy and was a naval officer across a few different tours in the second Gulf War. And even as part of that, I focused on technology within that operational capacity, communications, cryptography, and then nuclear engineering for the latter half of my Navy time, where I led the reactor mechanical division for a nuclear-powered aircraft carrier. I shifted gears a bit, went to Lockheed Martin, but then actually focused on commercializing core science within the portfolio of Lockheed Martin, and we built a whole new line of business focused around that sort of general capability. It was a really interesting set of environments we worked in. It was both commercial and government, and a lot of energy systems revolving around synthetic fuels and marine hydrokinetics and solar power and high temperature energy storage and all kinds of neat stuff. And that was what I would call my sort of street MBA, because coming out of the Navy, I didn't really know a lot about the business side of things, just the operational and the technical. And so then learning how to tie it all together with business cases and money was a good education for me. Following that, I built a small solar company on my own, then did business school. And in business school, I started a company called Relio, and that was a marketing automation company that we raised venture funding for. There were some elements of machine learning and AI there, mostly focused around prediction pricing markets for social content and sponsored content within social media platforms. And so there was an interesting element of how do you take what is an artistic endeavor and price it so that the artist and a business is able to agree on a market clearing price for sponsored content. So that was a very interesting set of challenges, both technical and social in both forms of the word. And Relio, we ended up growing for about 6 years and then sold to AT&T, or specifically Fullscreen Media, which was a division of AT&T. And following that, did some growth consulting, and as part of that work, found Exyn and joined as the Chief Operating Officer about 3 years ago, I guess now, almost 3 years ago, and just prior to the Series A. And we've been off to the races since then. And broadly, my charter within Exyn as the Chief Operating Officer is productization, go-to-market, and general sort of keeping the wheels on the bus.
Thank you for that, Ben. It's great to learn about your varied background, and you've done some fascinating work. Some of your early experience sort of links nicely to Exyn and what they do, so we'll get into that in a moment. But for anyone listening who's not familiar with Exyn, tell us all about the business. Who are Exyn Technologies at a high level? What's the mission of the business? And then we can jump into your role in a bit more detail, and then the technology behind the scenes of all of this.
Exyn Technologies is a autonomous robotics company that focuses on the nexus between high accuracy data collection and autonomous vehicle navigation and operations. What this means from a business perspective is that we solve the challenge of unlocking inaccessible data for industrial applications worldwide focus a lot on the idea of trying to gather enough data from physical environments that you can operate digitally or virtually with all the tools that are available to companies that have a lot of data that is digitally accessible rather than out in the physical world. So you can think of the corollary here being Facebook or Google, Amazon, et cetera. They are effectively digitally native. All of their information is digital. So it's all available to be in a position to apply large-scale machine learning or artificial intelligence to all of that data. And their challenge is more one of developing the right tools, whereas most of physical industries, their biggest challenge is just getting the data in the first place so that they can even apply the basic advanced analytics tools. So we fill that gap for industries worldwide. And we started off in the mining environment, where we are collecting basically structural data for underground mines, where they are in very difficult, dangerous, and dirty environments. So autonomous vehicles solve a whole bunch of challenges for them. And the key thing really is that when you're applying these core technologies, you end up finding that the challenges you solve from a software perspective end up being applicable to a huge variety of different market opportunities. And so we've been finding that the core technologies are trickling into a half dozen different industries now, which is pretty wild.
Yeah, indeed. I think people are slowly starting to realize that the impact that this visual technology can have and the use of drones outside of just traditional methods. Can you give us some insight into the different industries that are now coming on board with utilizing this technology, and walk us through an example of a customer journey at Exyn, from first conversations to how you guys educate them on what the technology can do to the impact at the end for the customer?
Yeah, that's a great question. The biggest area that we tackled in the beginning, as I mentioned, is the underground mining space. The specific opportunity that has taken hold as the so obvious in retrospect thing for every one of our customers is something called cavity monitoring. And what that means is for hard rock mines, they use explosives to blow up a bunch of rock, and then you pull out all of what was extracted, and then you run processing on it to get gold, platinum, et cetera. And in order to do that effectively and efficiently and economically, you need to understand what the structure of those environments are. You need to have a pretty highly accurate three-dimensional model so that you are planning to use the right type of equipment and the right type of consumables like explosives, or making sure that your people are in safe environments, all that kind of stuff. And so what we found was that the previous state of the art was quite literally a LiDAR on the end of a long stick that they would prop up, poking into this cavity, into this sort of open space. And that is a pretty crazy scenario, because what took them a few hours to collect data that was not super accurate because you couldn't access all of the different cavities or all of the different sort of geometries within that space. A single autonomous flight only takes 3 or 4 minutes, and you get 30 or 40% more accurate data, which is an incredible jump forward in an industry that is often trying to improve their efficiency by 1 or 2% at a time. And in that particular context, what the output is that is so helpful is that the teams are able to make decisions immediately, right on the ground, same shift, given a real-time representation, three-dimensional representation of a structure that you're not able to really get into safely. And so they're able to call back to the central control and say, hey, we need this type of truck, or we didn't do it right, we need to do another round of blasting, or whatever the next steps are that they're taking. They can do it in near real time rather than waiting an entire shift to come back up to the surface, talk to people, get it prepped for the following shift, and then before you're 8 or 12 hours behind, where in this case, your delay is on the order of minutes. And so that's a huge efficiency boost for most of those mines. And then once you have the system there, what we found is that they start using it for 100 other things that weren't obvious right up front. So you can use it to calculate volumes of stockpiles, which is the piles of raw material. You can use it for compliance, where you're required as an industrial facility to report out how much you produce each year. And so there's a whole bunch of these things that come out of being able to collect highly accurate three-dimensional models of an environment and to do it autonomously means that you can just collect a huge amount of data rapidly in near real time and give a good understanding for the actual environments digitally, which just wasn't available to any of these businesses before that.
You are listening to the Alldus podcast. When you're looking to scale your team, or if you are interested in showcasing your company in a future episode, reach out today. Or if you're in the market for a new role, visit our website to view open positions, www.alldus.com.
Focusing now on the team behind the scenes, obviously you've been with Exyn coming up on 3 years now, and then there's been incredible growth over that time. Can you give us some insight into what the current makeup of the broader technology team looks like, but then more specifically for our AI audience, the data science, machine learning, computer vision side? What does it look like day to day at Exyn?
For sure, yeah. So we've quadrupled in size since I joined almost 3 years ago, which has been an awesome experience already. And we're going to be doubling in size again, over the next year. We maintain a pretty sizable set of technical teams that are split across a bunch of different functions. We actually have separate research teams focused on motion planning, mapping, SLAM, some work around specifically ML classification and modeling of the environment. And then there's integration elements as well, where all of these need to be tightly coupled enough that they work coherently together, but also modular enough that we can update one thing at a time and don't have to have 30 people that all know every line of code in the whole stack. And so that's a really interesting challenge where it seems in the beginning as you're almost competing with yourself in a sense of pushing really fast R&D at the same time as you have to make very maintainable code and very safe operations for the systems. Because whether it's an aerial system or a ground system or even a handheld, it's not something that you want to be failing in the middle of a capture or a flight or a transit. And so it's a really fascinating balance of real world applicability and blue sky R&D in the sense of pushing the bounds of what's possible with autonomous systems.
So Ben, obviously with your background in the Navy and related experience, it meshed quite well to Exyn. But with the growth that you guys have experienced over the past few years, you talk about quadrupling in size. I would imagine you've brought in people from quite a range of backgrounds. Can you give us some insight into the types of people that you've hired, what you look for as you go about building the organization?
That's a great question. And it ends up being a pretty broad spectrum. So I mentioned that we have research teams as well as market-focused development and engineering squads as well. And so the backgrounds that you have for those different categories are actually pretty disparate as well. We hire pretty regularly out PhD and master's degree programs from universities that are focused on subject matter expertise in SLAM and autonomy and mapping and a bunch of these pretty specific areas. But we also hire from industry for folks who have done enterprise application development, for folks that have integrated and developed machine learning models and understand how to develop those in practice beyond just the sort of the theory of it. In a lot of cases, we end up teaming people up with a small group of very academic and very engineering, customer-oriented folks, and then the combined team is able to get a really great spectrum of the use case and the underlying theory that gives us a really robust set of modules that we can bring to bear. So we do a lot of work there. We bring a lot of internships in. We do a lot of collaboration with universities as well. And we've been hiring quite a bit from industry in a slightly broader sense, where we go from broader sort of vehicle companies on the hardware side, as well as pure software application development, where we're taking the outputs of the core system and developing those into usable insights for the end users.
Ben, final question from me. Obviously, it's been a remarkable journey over the past 3 years since you've joined, and you guys are going to continue to grow. When you look ahead for the future of Exyn and the adoption of this technology, what are you most excited about for the next few years?
So I think for me personally, I'm most excited about us getting out in the world and really changing what is possible for all the industries that we touch. It's one thing to be able to develop a cool technology and certainly the engineering nerd side of me loves the opportunity just to work on the cool stuff. But then when we get it out in the field and you watch people's reaction to the system flying itself or defining its own search volumes and just operating off of a single high-level command, it's awesome to watch the sort of when their eyes light up and they understand what it's going to mean for their job, how it transforms, how much more efficient they're going to be able to be. It's wild where we go on site and people probably don't believe us most of the time that it actually is an autonomous system, that you can really just do a 30-second mission plan and then hit go and step away and not have to do anything. And so when it actually works, then that's when it's really amazing to watch that transition. And as we're putting that into the field across a few industries right now, I think the next 2 or 3 years is going to see us enter another half dozen industries and probably other media as well. We're getting a lot of interest for porting our systems beyond just air and ground and handheld systems to further aerial, space, water, etc. And it's going to be really interesting to see what is the opportunity space for us there. The biggest challenge for most startups, as with us also, is focusing enough where you don't get too distracted. So I'm going to have to keep myself in check as well, making sure we don't go too far afield for those things. But that's probably the most exciting part, is being able to put it out in a lot of different industries.
Yeah, absolutely. Ben, thanks so much for coming on today. Really appreciate you talking to us, sharing your background, giving us some insight into the work you're doing at Exyn, and great to hear about the increased demand for what you're doing. And sounds like it's an exciting place to work. And yeah, we wish you, the team, and everyone at Exyn the best of luck in the year ahead.
Very much appreciated. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Alldus podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. We are available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and any Android podcast of choice. You can also head over to our website, www.alldus.com, to listen to more podcasts, view our open roles, and stay up to date with industry news. Thanks for listening, and stay tuned for more great episodes coming very soon.